Could the Cubs still be interested in Jordan Montgomery? John Heyman thinks they're still in the mix. Fansided just put a story out that I think is worth talking about where they say maybe Scott Boras and the Cubs are a little more cozy than some of us first thought. And Ian Happ on the IL, going to be out of action for a while. How does this affect the Cubs in spring training? And what does that look like for him moving forward on this season? Thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Make sure that you guys like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. That's a great way of saying go Cubs, and let's get this thing started. Everybody, welcome to the Cubs Baseball channel. I'm your friend. I'm your buddy. I'm your pal. I'm Mick Gillispie at Broadcaster Mick on the socials. And thanks for hanging out with us here as we talk Cubs baseball. And I appreciate all of you guys for jumping on live yesterday or maybe watching the live show. Had to survive the rotavirus, which I did, but it was painful. It was not fun. And anytime you get a stomach flu, it is 24 hours of the worst pain in your life, and then it goes away and you feel okay again. Just a little tired, but no big deal. All right, let's talk about another person that's dealing with an injury right now, a different type of injury, and that's Cubs left fielder Ian Happ. He suffered a mild hamstring strain, and he's going to be out for we don't know how long. Now, the thing about hamstrings and muscle strains and muscle pulls and all of that kind of stuff is that it's really hard to get an idea of where someone is when they're trying to come back. And if you come back too soon, you'll make it worse. So if I was the Cubs in this spot, you're talking about early spring training, I would probably sit back, let him heal, and then go through the spring training process again. Now, Craig Counsell says that he feels optimistic that Happ will be ready for opening day. And it's like the 3rd of March. So it's not like we're talking 2 weeks and the season starts. I mean, you still have a good month of runway before we really get into action. Now, for the Cubs, this actually might be to their advantage because now you get a chance to look at more players in that left field spot, guys who are fighting for a spot on the roster. And talk about Owen Casey, who's been a star for the Cubs in the early spring training. We knew that it was a possibility that he has the bat that could really turn heads, and that's exactly what we've seen him do. Had another RBI hit in the loss to the Dodgers, but he's just such a presence at the plate. He has predominantly played right field. We're seeing him play left field some. Another guy, Alexander Canario. Yeah, he's a center fielder by trade. He can play left field. He's fighting for a spot on the roster. Give him some at-bats and some experience out there, and that's a good thing. And then, of course, Pete Crow Armstrong and Mike Tauchman, both of those guys also play center. But when you can play center, normally left field's easy for you. Pete Crow Armstrong's going to have problems in left just because he's got so much more range than really anyone else you throw out into that position that it almost is counterproductive. You would almost rather put Bellinger in left and put PCA in center if you were playing those guys at the same time. And I know Bellinger has decent range too, but Pete Crow Armstrong is, I mean, he's like when Willie Mays was a kid running around covering ground, and I'm not comparing him to Willie Mays and saying he's going to be a Hall of Famer and the best ever. But when Willie Mays was young, he had tremendous range. I mean, even going back to his time in the Negro League where he was, a teenager, they would just put him in center field because he would run up on everyone, and that's the kind of outfield range that Pete Crow Armstrong has. So you put those guys in center field and tell them to go get it. I'm guessing that is what the Cubs are going to do. So, but who knows? Maybe somebody else. Brennan Davis comes back from the concussion. Maybe he gets in this mix as well. And I think this, if it's going to happen, is the best time that it could possibly happen. Now, some of you guys haven't been exactly the biggest Ian Happ fans, but when you look back at what he's been able to accomplish, it's not like he's out there and not doing well. I mean, he's been the model of consistency. I think that some of the problems that you have with him go back to maybe where he was batting in the lineup. And that of course comes down to the manager, although Craig Counsell says, hey, it doesn't really matter where you bat in the lineup. And last year, David Ross seemed to always put him at third, but he's a 29-year-old. This is the first year of a 3-year deal, $61 million. He's going to be around for a while, an extension. He's a switch hitter, as you guys know. He's been, decent. I mean, slashes 259, 351, and 435. He's won back-to-back Gold Gloves. You can't forget about that. He was an All-Star in 2012. So, just if this is going to happen, now's probably the time that you want it to happen. And don't forget about David Peralta. Remember, they signed David Peralta to a minor league deal. He's a guy who is a sneaky good player and would be a veteran option for this Cubs team. And I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't have a good spring, if he doesn't make the team, but he'd be in the mix as well for left field, depending on how long it's going to take Happ to get back. All right. One other thing I wanted to talk about on today's show was I love reading what people, anything that's Cubs related, I love to read it. And today, one of the sites I normally look at, and there's a lot of them, but one is called Cubs Crib, right? And it's Fansided site. And, I like that these guys kind of try to get out there and figure out stuff and talk about rumors in baseball and the hot stove. And Jordan Campbell wrote a piece basically saying that the Cubs have maybe did Scott Boras a favor by letting him sit up front when Cody Bellinger signed and met the media, right? And that, maybe the Cubs are still in the mix for Jordan Montgomery. And John Heyman from, the New York Post, MLB Insider, has constantly said that the Cubs have been mentioned in the same breath as Montgomery a lot. And what you're seeing is that Scott Boras totally misread the market. This has been a disaster for him in terms of the expectations and the actuality, right? And now Blake Snell is coming back and saying, hey, you know what? I'll do one of these deals like Cody Bellinger. And who knows what's going to happen with Jordan Montgomery. Now, the fact that Jordan Montgomery is a left-hander really makes me wonder, where he would slot into the rotation, unless you're maybe saying, okay, we're going to replace him with Wick, he'll take that spot that Wicks had in the rotation. And then, which is a possibility. I mean, we only saw Wicks right at the end of the season last year. I thought he pitched well enough to be a starter, but Jordan Montgomery, maybe you get him for 3 years. Maybe I don't know how you would do it though, with only $3 million under the tax threshold, unless you're willing to go over that or push it off until next year. So being creative would be a big part of this. It would be really interesting to me because the Cubs have had a history of not really liking to deal with Scott Boras. The owner and chairman of the team, Tom Ricketts, it doesn't get involved in negotiations. You saw the most he's going to do is when he came out and talked to the press for a couple of minutes before they signed Bellinger, basically saying, hey, we need to get something going here if we're going to do it. They did, and they got it done, right? But he also said, I'm not getting involved in that. Could Jordan Montgomery maybe become a Cub? I mean, could this possibly happen? How would he slot in there? What move would you make? Is there someone that they would get rid of salary wise? Is there a trade in there? I mean, I don't know. Like I've tried to bend it back and forth to try to figure out exactly what they're thinking, and a great example of the stuff that we just couldn't know is we were trying to figure out who was going to be taken off the 40 man to fit Cody Bellinger. Well, no one could have predicted that they were going to trade Bailey Horn to the White Sox and then, and get Matt Thompson back. I mean, there's just no way we would have been able to figure that out because that's certainly off the beaten path, but it was a great deal, right? just because you didn't have to get rid of a position player and you can still play out that battle in spring training. And besides that, maybe you didn't feel like Horn was going to fit in with your bullpen, and then you get someone that's a starter and you see if you can get the best out of Thompson, right? So I think we're in the same spot here. I'm definitely watching this because I feel like that Jed Hoyer has almost had a sense of urgency when it comes to making deals if he feels like he can make them. And this is the year where you can get a great free agent at a reasonable rate. And it's because of the market. So if you're creative and you can figure out how to add someone like a Jordan Montgomery to your pitching staff, then why wouldn't you do it? And it may hurt some development, but look at Ian Happ already, dealing with injuries. Pitchers deal with injuries all the time. You can't have enough pitching. And I think all of us kind of agree with that. So anyway, that's where I was today. I just sat here and I was trying to figure out, like, mathematically, how could you do this? So it would have to be a multi-year deal. Maybe you do a little bit of money at the beginning and then backload it like they did with Ohtani's contract. Would he be okay doing that? Is that something that's even possible? There could be some rules that I don't even know about that push you over that threshold anyway. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a baseball guy. And it seems like every time you turn around, there's something else that goes with it that you didn't know. Anyway, thanks for hanging out with us here on the Cubs Baseball channel. We'll watch the games and talk about them. And obviously, if anything breaks, we'll jump on and get on that with you guys as well. Don't forget that we're brought to you by the Tennessee Smokies, their team store, smokiesbaseball.com/store. Get your gear now. It's that time of year where you got to gear up, and they've got some great gear, Cubs and Smokies stuff, and it's all at fantastic prices. They've also got autograph items and team worn and team used stuff. So find out for yourself, smokiesbaseball.com/store. Thanks for hanging out, guys.